Well, welcome everyone. Again, my name is Charlene Margot, and I am founder of the Parent Education Series and co-founder of the nonprofit, The Parent Venture. We are very glad to have you all with us today for Parent Forum number 6 with Dr. Eran Magen. The title today is Helping Your Child or Teen Develop Good Habits, which seems like a perfect topic for the new year. And we had a great response to this event. Over 250 registered. When we started the Parent Forum, which is an initiative of Sequoia Healthcare District last March, we literally had to struggle to get 25 people willing to join us. And today we've just decided to open these virtual discussion groups up because so many of you have asked for them. So again, thank you everyone who's joining us. We have a great program for you today. Let me tell you a little bit about the format, but first, if you are looking for Spanish interpretation, we have with us Cynthia Hinestrosa, who is our simultaneous interpreter. If you need Spanish, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a globe icon. To hear Spanish, click on the globe icon and then click on Spanish. The rest of you can click on English. Okay, thank you, Cynthia, in advance. All right, so again, today's topic is helping your child or teen develop good habits. We know that this is an important topic, especially for the new year, because of the popularity and the signups today. This event, again, is an initiative of Sequoia Healthcare District. We are very grateful for their support, along with the Parent Venture, the Sequoia Union High School District, and Peninsula Healthcare District. So welcome, everybody. Today, we are going to have Eran give 15 or 20 minutes of content on the topic, and then we're going to open it up to you, our attendees. So if you have comments, please make them in the chat box. My partner, Bev Hartman, will be behind the scenes. Hi, Bev. Working in the chat, she'll be posting relevant links. Feel free to talk to us or talk to one another using the chat button. But for questions, we hope you will put them in the Q&A box. Again, we'll try to get to as many of your questions as we can. And then at the end of the event, about 1 o'clock, we will have a short, well, not that short, maybe 30-minute after party for those of you who want to stay on with us. So let me tell you a little bit about our presenter. Dr. Eran Magen earned his master's in education and PhD in psychology from Stanford University, and he completed his postdoctoral training in population health at the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Magen served as the research director for the University of Pennsylvania's Department of Counseling and Psychological Services before founding the Center for Supportive Relationships. He is currently the founder of a new organization, Parenting for Humans, which he might tell you a little bit more about today. Dr. Magen works with public school districts, universities, hospitals, and private corporations, where he teaches educators, clinicians, managers, and parents how to build stronger, more joyful relationships in their professional and personal lives. Dr. Magen's work has been published in top-tier scientific journals, including Psychological Science, Emotion, and Academic Pediatrics, and he has been cited in popular media outlets from Allure magazine to Psychology Today. Please join me in a really warm welcome for our keynote presenter, Dr. Eran Magen. Eran, take it away.
Great, thank you, Charlene. Hello, everybody. Thank you especially to all of you that switched on video and helped me feel like I'm not just talking to the void. This makes it extra fun. Michelle gets first blood for first video camera on. Thank you, Michelle. So I think I'm just gonna start. You said I'm the keynote speaker, Charlene, which made me feel good. I'm also the only speaker. Certainly the primary one as a result. Let me jump right into it. Play. All right. Can anyone see this? Yes. Okay. Both Deb and Lisa can see it. Good. So let's talk about this. I will show you this bottom strip on the last slide too, where you can get these slides in case you do find them helpful. So don't feel like you need to be scribbling anything madly, unless it's part of your process. So Charlene said who I am. So thank you, Charlene. In terms of people that are here, can you, actually, I'm just going to stop this for a second. Can you just use the chat function for the raise hands if you have a child who is pre-K? Just see how many people are roughly. you know how to raise hands? Yeah, there we go. Lucy does. Okay, so pre-K. And then who has somebody in elementary? You can keep the hand on. You don't need to. Okay. 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 And then middle school. Middle school is a popular age in 2020. Okay. And high school, and all the fears that come with driving. All right. Thank you. Okay. Middle and high. My hat is off to you. College, my hat is off to you also. Okay, so let me get back to the presentation. I might have lost it. It's gone. Sorry, this will take me a second. Zoom is nearly perfect, but not quite. Okay, as far as housekeeping goes, I'm gonna pause once in the middle of the presentation and ask for questions. If you have questions at any time, just type them into the chat. And Bev and Charlene are both amazing at picking them up from the chat. So I'll ask them in the middle. And then also at the end, once I'm done, then we'll just spend a lot of time doing Q&A and we can talk to one another about really anything you like, maybe related to habits, maybe not. So I'm just going to kind of blast through this topic of habits, essentially to give you things to think about either on your own or during the Q&A. So this is not a deep dive into the issue of habits and habit formation, but enough at least to get you thinking about it. In general, just kind of as a quick orientation, I think about things in terms of the emotional intensity of a given situation, right? How much emotional charge is in there. And I divide it basically into 3 parts where everything is fine. And that's where we build relationships. When people are kind of upset to quite upset, and that's when you do support. And then times when people are really in a bad way and having very extreme emotions, and that's when you do crisis management, really. Today, we are solidly in the everything is fine and we're trying to build a habit point, right? So we're not talking about situations when people are upset or when you need to calm someone down. You're kind of working together and building good habits. They might get upset, at which point you might need to do support, but this is not the scope of what we're talking about today. Okay, 5 seconds about why habits are important. The power of habits is that they're automatic, right? You don't need to think about, should I do it? Should I not do it? You know, is this a good day to exercise? Do I feel like eating this thing? Do I want to spend time learning this thing? Habits, by definition, are things that are automatic. There's some sort of an external trigger, maybe the time, maybe a thing that you see, and you just do something as a result. And this, not having to think about it, is enormously powerful. We all have decision fatigue. All your kids have decision fatigue. So not having to decide means that you will do it. And by the act of doing it, you strengthen that association between whatever trigger you saw and whatever behavior you're doing. So it becomes even stronger. And if the behavior is something that contributes to you being a better human being, then you just continue getting better. And if the decision is one that detracts from you being the kind of person you want to be, then you just keep going down that slide. And so whatever behavior is initiated by an external trigger through this kind of habit just builds and builds and builds and builds. And so building a good habit is a very good idea, and trying to break the bad ones is also a very good idea. Okay, so that was more than 5 seconds, but not much more on why habits. This book is amazing. For those of you who don't know it, I receive no royalties. I've received no payments to say this. Atomic Habits, the name, he also discusses the name, but the idea is that it's very small things that have a huge amount of power. Fantastic book, super clear. I listened to it personally, liked it a lot, helped me get back on an exercise routine. Very well organized. Probably about a third of what I'll say here is a recap of parts of the book, but I still recommend it. Honestly, I think it's great. Also available in libraries for those of you who are not in the buying mood. Okay. Let's talk for a second about how to fail at building a new habit, all the things not to do, and then we'll talk about the things to do.
Eran, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think we're not seeing your current slide.
Really? What are you seeing?
We're seeing introductions and housekeeping.
Wow, that's pretty far back. Hold on. I will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you for telling me. Oh, I see. Yeah, I see it now. I'm telling it resume sharing. It just won't. I'm going to stop share and I'm going to start again because that's life today. 1 second.
I also just made you a co-host. There we go.
I feel empowered. Thank you. Okay, here we go. So habits are powerful. This is what the book looks like. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. Can we all see this? Can somebody see this? Yes, Lisa sees it. Thank you. Okay, onward. So let's talk about how to fail at building a new habit. So the only thing you need to do if you want to fail at building a new habit is make sure that the change is abrupt, that the activity is frustrating and unpleasant and generally doesn't feel relevant to your goals. If you can do that, I can almost guarantee that you will fail at establishing a new habit. So if you don't want to do that, here's how you do things. Now, I'm going to switch while I talk between kind of how you build a new habit and between how your kid builds a new habit. It's the same thing, really. And of course, the better you learn it and the better you can teach it to your child, the easier things will be for everybody. But it's the exact same principles. So I'm just going to go back and forth. So if you want a new habit to stick, you have to go very slowly about making the change, very slowly. You have to feel successful throughout as you're engaging in this new behavior. It has to be at least pleasant, if not outright fun, which of course is a challenge sometimes, and it has to be relevant. So let's break it down a little bit more. So,
slides still aren't working.
What? How can that be? Thank you for telling me. So it just stopped once I started progressing?
Yeah, it's left up on the habits are powerful slide.
Wow. How will I do that? I apologize. Let me try one more time, and if it doesn't work, then I'll just talk my way through it, and you can see that. Sorry about this. This is a new Zoom trick. Okay. Okay. So this is how to not build habits. You can see this.
Yes.
Lisa to tell me she can see this. Okay. And can you see this? That it changed to a different one?
Yes, it did.
Okay, so I'm just not going to play it as a slide, and you'll just get to see the slides. And, you know, later we can all bemoan the lack of amazing animations. So to make habits successful, slow, to make habits stick, we want to make the behavior change slow. We need to feel successful. It needs to be pleasant, ideally, and relevant. So talking about these more in detail. To be relevant. This is a big one. We often have all kinds of goals and thoughts for our kids and what they should be doing and when and so on. And it's so much more likely to stick if it's something that's relevant for them. We can talk a lot, and maybe we'll talk later if you want to, about how to consult well for your child and how to consult well with your child. But at the very least, I would say that you can't just start dictating new behaviors, especially habits that you're trying to form over time through repeated behavior without talking to your kid about it. And when you talk to your kid about it, you might start with, hey, what kind of things do you want to work on? What habits do you want to form? And it could be a good idea to have a conversation about habits and the power of habits and say, you know, what do you think would be a good habit for you to form, and teach them about forming habits, which is amazing, you know, metacognitive skills for them to learn how to do it on their own. And start with something that is very relevant for them. And if there's something that they're not coming up with, but you are, like washing dishes, which is not every child's dream, then it's a good idea to talk about why that's helpful and how it's relevant and how it can help them. So get good buy-in before you're trying to do something as demanding as daily or weekly or any kind of recurring behavior. Buy-in is super, super relevant, super important. Okay. Onward. How to make it pleasant. So when you're trying to establish a habit, by definition, you're starting to do something you would not have been doing by default, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be work to try to establish the new habit. So To make it more pleasant, you can use reward, you can use praise if you're helping somebody else establish the habit. Just be mindful of the fact that anything that's connected to the chains of behavior you're looking to do is going to become part of that chain, right? I now feel a great craving for smoothie when I'm done exercising in the morning, because that's how I rewarded myself for exercise. And it's fine. I have no problem with drinking a smoothie, but just be mindful that whatever you do is going to become part of the chain. And once you take it away, the chain gets broken. There's going to be a jarring. So think about how you do it. Specifically, I would say be very intentional about physical external rewards that you're giving for establishing habits, or at least how frequently. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a little bit. But the reward and the praise is very important, especially for somebody else. It's harder to praise ourselves. It is easier to reward ourselves, by the way. You can absolutely set goals and then get certain special treats or toys that you wanted for yourself. But definitely when supporting another person, to praise them can be very effective. A point that's sometimes counterintuitive for people, I wonder how important of a slip this was, but a point that's sometimes counterintuitive for people is that establishing new habits and breaking bad habits is much harder at the beginning than later on, which means that at the beginning, you want to give a lot of rewards, a lot of praise, a lot of attention, rather than saving it for later, right? You don't wait for 10 consecutive days of, doing whatever. First day, big deal. Second day, big deal. Third day, kind of a big deal. Fifth day, big deal, right? And you space it out over time. Alcoholics Anonymous, they have it right? When you get the coins, you get more coins earlier on. And later on, the frequency of the coins diminishes. So same kind of deal. Remember, it's very hard at the beginning. Think, for those of you who remember driving stick, it's kind of first gear, second gear. First gear is a lot more work than fourth gear. Right? So a lot more rewarding. Okay, we can talk about pleasant a little more. I'll just add that if the behavior itself is something that is kind of inherently unpleasant for whatever reason, if you really dislike sweating and exercising often involves that, it's something to think about really, how to create conditions that'll minimize sweating, right? Can you turn the AC on 20 minutes before? Can you wear better clothes? Can you, whatever it is, that'll make it less uncomfortable, because at the beginning it needs to be super easy to be successful. So make it super easy to be successful. Pick a goal. Now, this is written as though you are trying to change your own behavior. If you're helping your child establish a new habit, they pick the goal, not you, right? That's very, very important. So let's say that your child says, oh yes, I have this important goal. I want to be a poet and I want to write a poem every day. And you say, okay, what is an amount of writing that you think you can do every day, no problem? And they say 2 books. And you say, okay, let's think about the time that you were feeling a little sick or you didn't, well, anyway, you bring them down to the point of the minimum goal, the smallest goal that they have 0 doubt that they can do easily. All these things, right? No doubt and easily. And then you cut it by half.
Okay, all right, I won't make anything.
So cut it by half. Because when you are first approaching that thing that you're about to try to do, that habit, drawing, exercising, writing, crocheting, whatever it is, you need to approach it with minimum, ideally no apprehension of failure, right? You should be coming in saying, I'm going to crush this automatically, right? So we start with making it easy. Then we still celebrate a lot of successes. We remain very conscious and we help the other person remember this was success. I heard myself saying something and I wanna get sharper on this. Some people need a certain level of challenge, and your kids and probably yourselves as well, right? So it's not, if it's gonna be 0 challenge and no problem, it might not be interesting for you or for the other person to do it. You need to calibrate and you need to think about this in terms of what's gonna be engaging and so on. But still, when you're trying to achieve this thing that you're working on, you should feel like you have a good chance of succeeding as long as you're putting some effort into it. Okay, that's the criterion we're looking for. Okay, and in terms of implementing small, slow changes, so you start small with a goal that you're sure that you can succeed. A mistake that a lot of people do is they increase criteria for success or increase the demands very fast, and people kind of lose their grip on the train, and the train just accelerates away. And we started on a good thing, but it got away from us, and then it's very depressing. So the increases are something that is worth paying a lot of attention to. So if your goal is exercising 5 minutes a day, you don't say, oh, that was easy, let me do 15, right? You want it to be too slow. You want it to be almost frustrating in how slowly it's increasing, because you're like, I can do more, I can do more, I can do more, and have the discipline so that you can almost always hit your goal every day. Okay, let me fill in a little bit of details. When you're establishing a new habit, the absolute #1 priority is to perform it consistently, which means that it has to be attainable. It has to be not too aversive, right? It has to be clearly defined and so on. But it has to have a clear trigger defined. That's also very important, right? So, but consistency is the most important thing. If your goal is to write poetry, then as long as you write 1 word a day, you got something, because you will write that 1 word at a certain time, maybe at a certain place. There's a trigger. You might say, every day after I brush my teeth at night, assuming that's something you do regularly. So you can say, when I'm done brushing my teeth, I'm going to write a word. And you do this. And once you have that habit, it becomes a lot easier to add more words. You can say, once you have the habit of starting to think about and then writing some poetry after you brush your teeth at night, it's easier to write more, right? But it has to be consistent. That's priority 1. Priority 2 is, once it's consistent, you work on the quality of the thing that you're performing, because that's also part of the habit that you're building, right? You're building a habit of doing this thing well, whatever it is. And so you want to do it consistently, always in the same condition, the same trigger, and you want to do it well. And only once you have those two do you start increasing the quantity of the behavior that you're working on. Okay, so far. Let me pause for a minute. We're close to the end, but still. Charlene or Bev, any questions that are good to address now as opposed to later?
Yeah, I think one, Eran, when you were talking about feedback, a parent writes here, I've always understood that too much external praise or reward isn't great. How do you build intrinsic motivation using praise?
I'm going to punt that. Can you save that as the first question for the Q&A?
You can.
You pin it. It's a very good question, but I don't want to kind of derail too much and then come back. So we will talk about it, but very soon. Were there other kind of points of clarification, Charlie?
No, I think otherwise we're good.
Okay, so priorities: consistency, then quality, then quantity, in this order. General tips. So pick a trigger. When you want to do something regularly without thought, something else needs to tell you that it's time to do it, right? So you can do it every day at 6 p.m., or you can do it every time you get home, right? Or you can do it every time that something else happens. But in a way, part of forming a habit is surrendering control over when it starts, right? You let other things dictate it. And when that other thing happens, you start doing the habit. And the more you get in the habit of doing this, the more you strengthen that association, the more consistent your behavior will become. So anytime anybody wants to start a habit, you have to have a very clearly defined trigger. That's number 1. Number 2, choose goals that you can control. There are lots of things that we can't control and that we tend to kind of automatically put as goals for ourselves, right? I'm gonna, play a live gig at this place because I'm going to be so awesome at playing harmonica, or I'm going to, win a race, or even participate in a race, or anything like that. But these are very hard to control. These are outcomes. So the things that we can control is things like the amount of time we put into something, or the number of times that we do it, or the order in which we do certain activities, right? So these are great goals. Put work as the goal rather than the outcome, right? Every day I'm gonna do this for 10 minutes, no matter what comes out of it. Because then it also makes it predictable. If you say, I'm gonna work at it until I get a perfect score at the thing, right? You're practicing for your SATs and you're saying, I'm gonna practice the math test and test math exams until I had a perfect score. So your kid sits there, starting at 6 p.m. and is still awake at 11, bloodshot eyes, and can't, because, didn't get perfect score yet. That's not good, and that kid will never practice again. So goals should be ideally things that you can control. And then tracking is actually really important as well. So low-tech stuff like, a table on a wall that just lets you do a check mark every day when you did it is fantastic. And the last part of performing that activity, whatever the activity is, can be logging. The logging doesn't have to be available to you if it's a habit that your child is trying to form, right? But it needs to be somewhere in the child's face where they see it, because it itself serves as a reminder. It serves as a kind of a trigger. It can also be a good way to decide when it's time to do rewards, again, both for yourself and for your child. Definitely if you're okay with your child basically doing honor system, right? And you can say, okay, once you have, so you start the behavior, day 1, something good happens, day 2, also day 5. And then you say, once you do it for 2 weeks as scheduled, we get this thing. And you can agree in advance. In general, I'm a big believer in collaborating as much as possible, right? Agreeing what the rewards would be, what's reasonable, discussing it with them, thinking about what constitutes a time for a reward, when is it okay, and so on. Okay, so that's for tracking. So have a trigger, choose a goal you can control, make tracking really easy. Troubleshooting, and this is, I think, the last one. Let's say that you have a goal of exercising every other day. And let's say that every other day came and went and you didn't exercise because life. So once this happens, ideally just, shrug it off, get back, do your habit as planned. Don't compensate. You don't exercise twice as much because you missed. You don't try to write twice as much because you missed. You don't compensate because you don't want to make it harder, because you want it to be successful and you want it to be pleasant, or at least not unpleasant, right? So just like you ideally ignore behaviors that you don't like and hope that they extinguish as long as it's not physically dangerous for anyone. Same thing, you ignore the failure. Don't dwell on it, not with yourself, not with your kid. Don't spend time about, oh, what happened and how didn't I, but just, okay, let's just, do you think you'll be able to do it the next time? Yes, okay. And if you really believe, then just let it go. If you think that there was some sort of a systemic problem, right? It's the wrong time to do it. It's the wrong place. The goal was aimed too high. Your kid's motivation is actually very low because they're fearing failure. Then change the plan, right? Reduce the criterion for success. Reduce the intensity, reduce the goal, whatever you need to do to make it easily approachable, easily motivating to do this. Okay, so that's if you slip. And then for bad habits, there's a lot that we could say about this, but just in general, the 2-step process for breaking bad habits. One is start exercising some control over the bad habit. And when I say bad, I mean this very broadly, right? Just anything that you want to change. It doesn't have to be actually bad in the eyes of any other person. But exercise some control over it. Do you always want to have dessert after you eat dinner? Yes. Do you think it's a problem? This month I do. Okay, so I want to change that. So see if you can exercise some control. Like say, okay, let's open a 5-minute gap between the time that I'm done having dinner and the time that I have dessert. Right? Just start stretching a little bit. Set a timer. 5 sounds like a lot. 3 minutes. It's fine, but just start creating some spaces, some daylight between the thing that's triggering the bad habit and the actual execution. So you're starting to break that association intentionally, right? Just create space in terms of timing, in terms of location, in terms of whatever it is, right? Break the trigger or start loosening the trigger. Then, if you want to get very serious about it, you can build a habit that blocks the bad habit. You don't eat chocolate, eat an apple every single time. You don't want to snip at someone when you're talking with them on the phone. Always put yourself on mute when you're talking, right? So you have time to think about whatever it is, but start building habits that block the habit. It's very hard to not do something. It's a lot easier to do something that prevents you from doing something else. Okay, I think this might be it for this. So summary, new habits that you're trying to form or anybody else trying to form, they stick if implementation is slow, if we feel successful, if it's generally pleasant, and if they're relevant. All these are really important. Specific implementation tips. Have a very clear trigger, either a time or a place or an event or something like that, that says, okay, now do this. There's no judgment involved, because that's the whole point of a habit, is there's no judgment involved. Has to be done consistently. Consistency over everything. Then quality, then quantity to build a habit. And make it really easy to track how performance went, because then conversation can happen around it, even if it's just in our own heads. Okay, I think that's it for habits. Newsletter, Parenting for Humans. So if you want a newsletter that is things like this or announcements about other workshops that are happening, this is the URL, parentingforhumans.com/join. If you want to do this really in depth, then you're welcome to the class. There's a foundations class that talks about all these things that you can see there, building trust and goodwill with your kid and doing good emotional support when it happens, and how to get more cooperation and less conflict, and how to identify and manage emotional crisis and self-care for parents and things like that. The class itself, I want to say in advance, so it's a small group, it's up to 10 people. It lasts for a few, this one, it's 7 weeks long, a weekly meeting. Payment is optional. It's very, very important for me that financial ability not be a barrier to learning about how to do good parenting. And so, if you go to this URL, if you want to sign up, you can sign up. If you want to sign up and you can't pay for it, send me an email, and then you'll sign up without paying for it. It's as simple as that. We've done it lots of times. It's a strong, important value for me in this. So if you're at all interested, go check it out. Don't worry about price. If you can afford it, great. And if not, then you don't need to afford it. You can just do it. Then, oh, that is the last slide. Okay, so at the bottom there, you have the URL for getting these slides from today's workshop meeting, I guess. We didn't really workshop anything yet. And that is that. So I'm going to stop the share. Of course, now that I want to stop it, I don't. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share and we can all talk for a bit. So if you have questions or thoughts, hopefully you put them already in the chat. And if you haven't, then please put them again. I may call on you once you ask a question if I have, more information to request. But you also don't have to answer once I call on you. So we had one question that I cleverly punted. Can you remind me what it was, please, Charlene?
You bet. So this one is from Deborah. She's asking, I've always understood that too much external praise or reward isn't great. That would be a la Carol Dweck. How do you build intrinsic motivation through praise?
Okay, so there's some debate actually about extrinsic and intrinsic motivation and how they all work. I guess, so there are a couple of questions folded in there, right? How do we build intrinsic motivation, and specifically, how do we use praise in order to do it? I would say a couple of things. To me, it starts with modeling. So kids pick up a lot of stuff that we do. I was in Israel. I was in the in the military there, and I remember only two things from officers course. And the first is that they taught us that the three most important principles of leadership are modeling, modeling, and modeling. So they'll look at you and they'll see you and they'll pick up on values that you have. It's going to be very clear. So that's part number one, the least easy and the least satisfying part of this answer, modeling. Part number two, what they care about is what they care about. And so you really have to talk with them and you really have to understand what they care about and how what you're wanting them to be motivated to do connects with what they care about. And if there's really a strong divergence between those two things, right? If you really want them to care about animals, but they only care about excavators, like my son, then either you get very clever about explaining how the two are connected and how this ends up affecting something they care about, or you do, what's the term? It's not negotiation, but you have like a real conversation. You can say, this is important to me. And this is why I feel this is important. And now let's discuss. You don't have to agree. Maybe there's a question how much you disagree. Sorry, this is feeling a little bit abstract. I see some people nodding though, so I know I'm not totally losing you, but this feels a little bit abstract. The point is that if you have something that for you is very important, you really want your kid to learn to cook, and your kid really just doesn't care at all about cooking. Building intrinsic motivation for cooking, you could do it. You could get, very sophisticated and how and when you praise and so on. But in the end, if they're not interested, they're not interested, and that's okay. You might say, this is important, and this is why I think, and this is why I suggest, and so on. And you decide whether or not you want to coerce, is it that important? Is it worth destroying the relationship or hurting the relationship for? If they don't care, they don't care. Praise, having said all this, praise is a wonderful way to build motivation, and better than external reward, physical reward, to build intrinsic motivation, right? Because maybe this is like the only actual pearl in my entire confused speech. Kids enjoy, like all of us, knowing that they can influence other people, and especially parents, right? It's wonderful to be able to influence parents, and it's wonderful to get attention from parents. For your child to see you emotionally moved by something that they did is a powerful reward. You don't have to, so if they're cooking, right? If they made you a little bit of burnt toast and brought it to you with some grass on top of it, and you are just visibly moved by that, and you're so happy and so grateful and so proud of them, right? That's a great way to start signaling for them that this is really important, and they'll pick up on that much more than if you say, oh, I'm so glad you cooked this piece of toast, now I'm not worried you'll be homeless and you won't be able to blah blah. Like, you don't need to, totally separate from the kind of cognitive explanation stuff. For you to be positively moved, I used to do a lot of work with this on teachers. Teachers tend to sometimes be negatively moved quite easily, right? I can't believe you did that. That is disrespectful to me, and that is blah 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 blah. And kids are like, haha, I can control your emotions now.
Exactly, send them to the ranch.
And so instead, when negative stuff happens, you remain cool. When positive stuff happens, you blow up with happiness. That is a big signal for them that something good happened. So that was my long and hopefully at least a little bit helpful response. Thumbs up. Thank you.
All right, Eran, we're getting a couple questions on a theme, which I think is kind of the theme of the day. What if your child or teen doesn't want to form any new habits, like starting their homework earlier in the day so they're not up too late?
Personally, I think it's perfectly fine to negotiate with kids. You're negotiating from a position of superior power, which is even better for you, but it's still a negotiation. If we're talking about this issue of homework, for example, and I'll talk for a bit, but then I'll ask you to talk and add maybe more details. But if you want a child to do homework and develop a habit of doing it at a certain time, it probably starts from a conversation about doing homework in general, right? Because if there's no problem with homework, probably this conversation would have never happened. And if homework is sometimes late, does your child think it's a problem or not, and why? And so, like, that's a good conversation to have. It doesn't have to be like a you know, terrifying, you know, trying to scare them straight. Just really talking like, how do you think about homework? Why is it important? Why is it not? Do you think it's a big deal if you miss something or not? Well, here's what I think, and what do you think about that? And, you know, so sometimes things get resolved there. Sometimes not. You'll still disagree strongly, and you may decide to, you know, impose sanctions or ultimatums. That's a separate conversation, I think, for us, for how to do something like that. But assuming you can come at some sort of a base understanding that homework needs to be done, at least some homework needs to be done, then it becomes operational, right? How to make it easiest for everybody. And then I think it's a conversation absolutely to have with your child, something like, you know, it might be easiest to just have it happen at a predictable time during the day, and you know that it's always this, so we never schedule things for that, and it's never tempting, and you never miss any of the other things that you like because of this. What's the best time to do this? You start collaborating on this, right? And your child says, oh, you know, between 2 and 2:30 a.m., all of my friends are asleep, and that'll be the best time for me to do homework. Maybe, okay, maybe we should think about alternatives. But now we're collaborating on the how, right? Okay, that's as far as I can take this, but I would love to hear some thoughts and responses from people about this in a reality check. I think I need to allow you to unmute at this point, sorry. Okay, you can now unmute yourselves if you want to reply.
Okay, Eran, are you ready to tackle a slightly different question?
Wait, I want to check if what I said kind of clicked with anyone at all, or if people
So that question actually came from me, and it's not a problem academically. I'm more worried about her health and her lack of sleep.
Yeah.
She can't really, I mean, I don't have a leg to stand on because we just got her report card and there was nothing less than an A, but I worry about her health and her sleep.
Yeah.
So I don't really know how to motivate her to, like, can we start this earlier? Like, good for you that it's important and you finish it, but at the detriment of your health. Like, what do I use to get her, you know, her response is like, I'm fine.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. So is the behavior that you're hoping she will change just the bedtime?
Yes, just to get a certain number of hours of sleep a night so that she's not like really struggling to get out of bed in the morning.
Okay. And when does she usually go to sleep?
Well, on school nights when she has homework, not until sometimes after midnight.
Because she finishes homework first.
Right, but she doesn't start homework until later.
Right, so you're living what is the dream for some parents and the nightmare for others, right? You're like, oh, your daughter insists on doing all of her homework. Let me feel bad for you. But on the other hand, she's going to bed too late. Okay. And she sees no problem with her amount of sleep that she gets?
No, she says, I'm fine.
How much sleep does she get?
About, well, depending on when, 7 or 8 hours, which I know isn't bad, but I have another teenager that's a year older and he gets 2 to 3 more hours of sleep every night.
So I'm just going to brainstorm for a second. So don't take anything I say too seriously, but given her unusual dedication to finishing homework, can you set a time at which she has to stop doing homework and then see if that, well, anyway, there are many things that can happen as a result, but can you say like no homework allowed after 10?
I'm sure I could. I was just trying to create the buy-in from her.
Yes, and again, in the spirit of brainstorming, I think ideally this all gets done collaboratively. It sounds like right now you're saying she doesn't see a problem with the amount of sleep that she's getting. It hasn't hindered her in anything. You're worried that there might be some health implications and so on. So
because on the weekends she'll sleep in till noon. Like she's got a huge sleep deficit, I think.
Yeah, which of course she also doesn't have a problem with, right? Sleeping till noon.
Right.
That's fine. Okay, so and are your concerns about her health based on anything that you're seeing or experiencing with her, or just kind of a general idea that this is not how it should be working?
It's a combination of a general idea and, you know, the pandemic. So there's already all these mental like issues that I worry about with just, you don't see many of your friends, you're not engaged, right? So it's just the overall health. And I know that getting more sleep would probably help with that. Like her general happiness and health, I guess.
And dare I ask what kind of modeling she's receiving around this?
Oh no, I go to bed before her.
Okay, good. It's a touchy question to ask always, but I'm glad for you. Okay.
Yeah. Although her dad is a firefighter, so he doesn't have good sleep patterns.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, I think with regards to going to sleep, there's a big question about buy-in. Does she care at all? I mean, otherwise it pretty quickly becomes a power struggle, right? You start like switching things off, and the romantic era, they would be reading under the blanket with a flashlight, but now they're just like sitting there on TikTok. So how far is she, do you think? Like if 10 is 0 to 10, 10 is like, yes, mom, I agree, I should be going to bed earlier. And 0 is like, you are talking about total nonsense here. This makes 0 sense to me. Where is she?
Probably a 3.
Yeah. So I think in the big picture, your alternatives right now are a power struggle or a good deal of conversating about this. But I agree. I think buy-in is super important. I think that it may be helpful to suggest things that don't seem very extreme to her. Like if you're saying, look, here's the usual time you go to sleep on weekdays, 1 a.m., whatever. I want to see if we can, as an experiment, I'm a huge fan of experiments, and a lot of kids are too, right? What happens if as an experiment, we say midnight instead of 1 for a week and just see how it feels. And then we talk about it.
But she might go for that if she thinks it's temporary.
Right. And, again, ultimately, if it's not clear that there's damage and if you're not absolutely sure that it's happening, like who's to say? I mean,
Yeah.
I think many of us would agree. I think it's better. I want to go to bed before midnight. And sometimes I do. But I think that this approach of experiments often is very fruitful, right? Because it is temporary and it is also super respectful. We'll experiment and then we'll discuss and we will decide. We'll share observations and discuss and move on. So maybe starting with an experiment.
Okay.
Any more
Thank you.
suggestions
I'll
from
try.
our large helpful audience? Okay.
All right.
Charlene.
Are we ready? Are we ready for another one, Eran?
I am ready for another one, Charlene.
Okay, I think this is a great question, and I am certain that parents are all feeling this way. This parent asks, how do we encourage habits that we cannot model? For example, my kids are always on their phone on Snapchat and TikTok, and I'm on the computer all day, but not those apps. For my child, the screen is a screen, and I don't seem to be walking the talk. It appears to them that I'm saying, do as I tell you and not as I do. Any suggestions for having these conversations? It's a good question.
Can I call forward the asker?
Rumi, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. I am right here, but for some reason my video is not turning on. But can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. So yes, I'm here, Eran, and that's my question.
So can you just give like a little bit more?
Okay, so yeah, if they're not doing schoolwork, they're all the time on the phone. And so am I, not on my phone, but on my screen, on the laptop. And there's so much work. I mean, I don't think I step away more than 15 minutes in an 8-hour work day away from my screen. And then it's like me just, raising my head and say, hey, you've been for too long on your phone, put the phone down. And they'll just give me such a weird look, like, look at you, you're looking at the screen constantly and you're telling me to put and we all know that it's not great. And we try to model the behavior of 20-20-20, which, our local school psychologists say for every 20 minutes, you are looking at the screen, look at something 20 feet far away for 20 seconds. So
Yeah.
you give all the preachy stuff, but it doesn't hold water with with my daughter. So what do you advise us?
How old is she, Rumi?
19?
19?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. An actual person. Sorry, not to everybody. Anyway, you get. I mean, to be honest, I think this really does bring up the question of, well, how critically important do you feel this is, right? If you're not doing it for yourself and you are doing it for her, is it very important because for you it's work, and work is critical, and work, pays the bills, and without, if you don't look at the computer for 16 hours a day, she will not have a cell phone to look at 20 hours a day, possibly, right? Again, I think that the easiest way to reduce behaviors that you don't like is to encourage behavior that you do like that makes that behavior impossible, right? So if you can find activities that she cares about or enjoys that involve necessarily not looking at her phone, like playing guitar, then you stand a better chance of, succeeding at the phone removal surgery than just telling her that it's not good. I think that you can probably model for her and even brainstorm with her maybe. Now, again, I'm just brainstorming now, right? But sit with her and brainstorm about ways that you could be having less screen time, because it sounds like you're not so happy about it either, right? And I don't think a lot of people would be. Right? And like, how can you reduce screen time? What can you do differently? Like, show her this is important for you as well. That's another angle to go about it. But do as I say, not as I do is a very difficult leadership stunt to pull, unless you're willing to coerce. It's very tough, and I think there's a question of, how sincere does she feel that you are in your wish to have less screen time? And I don't doubt that you are. It's just a question of how well she understands it, right? That you really don't like it, that you really feel like it's unhealthy for you, for her, that you're worried about this, that you would rather it be different. Let me pause for a second. What do you think, Rumi, so far?
I think we did have, she did have some other options before the pandemic, but since then it's been very, I mean, and though I said that I do encourage her that, you meet friends, be socially distanced and still, take a walk in the park or something to get her away from the phone, because it's just like an extra appendage to her now.
Yeah.
So it's and now it's just because of this pandemic, it's just too much. It's just not out of her hands.
Yeah. So it's almost like, if I was saying that, to break a behavior, introduce a behavior that blocks it, in a way, all the other behaviors were taken. Right. And this is
absolutely no chances. And she does love music. She plays 4 instruments. So, but even those are like TikTok videos. She's creating she is creating her own like guitar songs and everything on TikTok. So it's just all the time. It's like 24/7. She sleeps very little, and I agree with that parent Deborah or earlier about the lack of sleep is a real problem.
Yeah.
But the lack of sleep is aggravated with this use of technology. And it's not just technology for education. I mean, there is no option. Everything is online school.
Yeah.
So it's online, but everything else is also online.
Yeah, so it sounds like the main issue here is just the paucity of activities that are not on the phone for her, right? Things she can do and be engaged with and enjoy that are not on the phone. But if
Yes.
there were more of those, and probably there would be less of the phone, which is something worth thinking about. So maybe we can talk about this for a bit. But first, I want to check in with Charlene. I know that it's the end of the hour. You want to do like a
Yeah.
closing before we continue?
Yeah, I just first of all want to say to those of you who need to sign out, thank you so much. We want to respect your time. Thank you for joining us again. Sorry for the Zoom mishap. This program will be on video on our YouTube channel. Again, the sponsorship of Sequoia Healthcare District. Thank you, Dr. Karen Lee. We could not present these programs without you. So for those of you who need to go, please feel free. And we will actually stay on now for about another 30 minutes in what we're calling the after party. So please stick with us if you would like to. And for those of you who have to go, thank you for joining us today. Eran, back to the question.
Thank you.
Let me know when you're ready for another one.
Okay.
And I just want to say people are definitely chiming in and saying, we've got that. The kids are on autopilot. As soon as school is out, it's either gaming or the phone.
Yeah. Yeah. So the after party, for those of you who weren't in one before, came from thinking that if this were a physical event, right, inevitably at the end, invariably at the end, some number of people just going to come down and then we all talk. And I realized I started missing this after doing the Zoom activities where it's like end of time, bam, everybody disappears literally. And so I thought maybe we can just stay and hang out for those who want to. Okay, so, well, let's open it up. So if the question is what do kids do now during a pandemic that is not on the phone? Do people have some ideas to share? So I have thoughts, but there's 50 more parents here than me. Cooking.
Well,
Music.
yeah, cooking is one. Getting out and exercising, but it's how do you get that shared belief that that is important? And when they, I definitely agree with what you're saying in terms of have the conversation, get them to make their own goal, but it's the teenage mindset of you're trying to make me do something, so I'm instantly going to be defensive and power struggle with you. So that's the challenge I face.
Yeah, the reactivity, right? If you're pushing, I'm definitely going to push back.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what you're saying.
Yeah.
It could
So
be eat candy every day.
Right. No, well, that makes life pretty easy then, right? Maybe Lisa kept saying, don't do all your homework.
Yeah.
Whatever you do. So, okay, let's the issue of reactivity, let's kind of wait with that for a little bit as we continue surveying for things to do outside of the phone, but then come back to this, okay, Pam?
Yes.
Right. So things to do. So people wrote a bunch of stuff that I managed to catch as it was passing, drawing, cooking, practicing music, going on walks with friends, doing stuff with friends outdoors, which in California is less of an issue during the winter. Either far apart or wearing masks. It kind of leads to the general question of what do kids do now that doesn't involve phones, pandemic or not, even in general. Here's a funny one. Do you do things with them? Are there things that you could be doing with them, maybe away from your computer, and spend more activity time together, whether it's playing Connect 4, the best game in the world, or cooking, or practicing music, or listening to music, or whatnot. So I wonder, Rumi, I'm thinking still about you, and you mentioned, the problem of having a lot of work that you need to be doing on your computer, but do you feel like there's room for more activities that you too could be doing with your daughter away from the computers and screens?
Yes, we do some puzzles. We play Uno, stuff like that. We do have those. But the moment we are done with that, up comes the phone. It's like it's not even 2 inches away from her hand while we are doing some other activity. So it's over dependence on these devices, but just can't seem to give a viable argument for her.
Yeah, I think the direction I would be thinking about is, even though there are few sights more horrifying than seeing a child wake up and do this. At the same time, a lot of adults do that too. And so kids are more comfortable with it, right? They'll like sleep with it next to them, and we kind of pretend that it's far away before we do this in the morning. But I do think that in general, instead of thinking about how we want the phone away, we want less phone, think what is it you want more of? And you have to get pretty specific about the more of, right? And the more clear you can be in your head about things that she could do, or experiment with her, try with her, suggest to her, or discuss with her, right? The more other things she has to do, the easier it becomes, right? Because to not do something is very, very hard. To not use the phone, to not whatever, is very hard, but to go do something else is a lot easier. So I think, again,
That is a good advice. Yes, thank you, Eran. I had not thought of it like that, so thank you.
so maybe, do you want to brainstorm with me for, a few more seconds about like,
Of course, sure.
what more
Although
you
we
would
just-
want people to be doing?
I want to also keep an eye on the time, Eran, and try to answer as many questions as we can today.
Yes, there are other parents too.
Yeah, but everybody's still watching, so till people start actively signing off, I think we're okay. I'm kidding, but really, just a couple more seconds, Rumi. Like, what are some things that you think could be on the more list instead of on the less list?
Well, I could encourage her to play her music more. I mean, which she is doing already, but she'll end up recording a video for the TikTok stream, whatever it's called. So I could encourage her to do more of the music. I could encourage her to do more of, working on puzzles and stuff like that. But yeah, but I could definitely, thank you. That's a good suggestion. Encouraging her to do more of something else instead of saying less of her phone.
Yeah. Plus, there's housework. Okay. Yeah. I mean, there really is, right, Lauren? Yeah. You can. So okay. So, Charlene, I am now coming back into the fold. Yes.
Okay, I think this is a great question. What do you do when a child has an idea for a habit? She develops it, but then it dies out quickly. She's not very open for a discussion about it. How can I help her? Kids who pick up on a new habit and then it just goes away.
So how can we help a child like that? I guess the first question that I have is it a problem that this thing went away? Like, sometimes we try something, then we don't like it, and then we're done with it. And that's okay. Because we don't, not every meeting is a marriage, which is probably a good thing. So what's the problem there? Is it that it's a pattern of a time? What do you think?
Sabina, are you trying to answer, Ron?
Yes, I am.
There you are.
So she, like, one of the things she would like to do is start her homework earlier.
Yeah.
And then she does it for a few days, and then it again falls apart. It's the same for reading books. She thinks she should read more, and then she has a book to read for school, and she starts 2 days before it's due. And it just keeps happening. And she, you can see she's frustrated with herself, but yeah.
Okay, that was my question. You anticipated it. So the question is, did she let go of it because she was done with it, or did it sort of slip away from her, but really she wanted to keep doing it? That sounds like more like the latter.
Yes, she would like to change herself or to change her habits.
Yeah, okay. So do you think that something like what we covered today would be helpful, to sit with her and kind of consult with her through how do we choose, a clear trigger, a minimum goal, and then cut it in half, focus on consistency, and slowly increase quality and quantity? Would just kind of this kind of guidance be helpful for her?
It would be. My thing is that she doesn't really want to talk too much about to us because she feels like, to her, it really feels like I'm failing in this. So it's harder for us. I mean, she's really disappointed in herself. So it's harder for us to guide her.
You're
It's
saying she
easier for
doesn't,
us to guide her in something that she wants, but she hasn't tried it yet.
when she hasn't failed at it yet?
Yeah.
And were you saying, it cut out just for a second, were you saying that she has a hard time approaching you about things that she tried doing and stopped doing because she feels already like she failed and she's ashamed of it somehow or feels bad about it, so she won't talk to you about it?
Yes, that's the case.
And do you have a sense of what makes it hard for her to come talk with you when she feels like she failed at something? Is she worried about your reaction? Is she imagining that you would be judging her? Is she just not wanting to talk about her failures to anybody? Like what would make it harder for her to come talk about, lack of success?
I think in general, she has very high expectations of herself. So it's really hard for her to talk or to admit even that something doesn't go well.
Okay.
And she has a very much of an avoiding thing. So it's like if she doesn't talk about it, it's not there. And then suddenly she realizes, okay, now I'm in the same situation.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, if you can ignore it for long enough, you can pretend that it's not there until it, of course, explodes in your face. Okay. So I'm thinking about a couple of things just to throw out some ideas. And again, I'd love to hear your thoughts. One is you can either let her see a recording, of this, the first 20 or 30 minutes or however it took of this, just so you can see on her own. You can suggest it as a resource, or you can buy her the book, Atomic Habits, and she can read through it and implement as she pleases. The other is, like you said, if she's more comfortable talking about things that she hasn't tried yet with you, then you can give her now the experience of going through this in this, much more structured, thoughtful way that really sets her up for success. And you'll probably learn from that. So that's idea number 2 is, if she's willing to talk about new things, then talk about new things, not about the old things. That's okay. And number 3 is you could try modeling, establishing new habits for her and troubleshooting it by inviting her to consult with you on what you're trying to establish and showing her, right, the times that you're facing difficulty, needing to change the goals, needing to frequency, setting up, rewards for yourself, things like that. So she can sort of ride along with you as you're establishing a new habit and seeing how that's done, but also modeling that it's not success immediately all the time. How you're recovering.
Getting more ambient noise. Anybody know where that's from?
What do you think? Would any of these 3 be relevant?
Yes, I do think that actually all 3 might, it's worth a try and then see if it works. And especially if the book, if it's on audio as well, that might work. I don't see her read many books. They not, especially if you, if it's on audio, she does listen to books.
Yeah.
So
I listen to the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She has a habit of listening to the same book over and over. But if it would be this book, it would be great.
Yeah. Establish the habit of learning habits from the book. Yeah. Okay. Wait.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Eran,
Yes.
one comment I want to add to what Sabine was saying. I could relate to what she was saying. Could you speak to something along the lines of, I think what's underlying maybe some of the teens here, in my case as a teen, is the fear of failure.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's giving them the reluctance to try something else, maybe that they've tried in the past, where now they're reluctant to try something more in the future, but they haven't necessarily adopted that growth mindset, and willingness to just try. And I'm running into the situation with the teen who we've been modeling all the right behavior, but I think it's not getting them over the hump of that fear of failure or trying. Can you speak to some ideas of how to maybe get beyond that obstacle? I like the idea of experiments, but open to some other ideas.
There are lots of really different, thank you for the question. There are lots of really different approaches to failure and, don't say failure, say, growth opportunity, or say, challenge or whatever. I personally feel that it would be easier if people stop being so worried about failing, like that failing is okay. We don't need to hide from it, right? And that failure is how you pay for any success that comes afterwards. Literally, I imagine each failure is a coin. And eventually I have enough of those and I can buy some success. So I think there's really a question of how are they thinking about failure? What's so scary about it? And I think that, so modeling, super important, of course, and it sounds like you're really conscious of that and intentional about it. I do think that really having like actual conversations about it, teens are definitely old enough to be talking about it. And really saying, you know, let's talk about, you know, when's the time that you feel like you failed? And then they talk and say what happened, and you know, what were you worried would happen, and so on, and talk about yourself and failures that you've had, and how that felt, and so on. So not hiding the existence of failures or trying to diminish how it feels, right? But putting it in a larger context, saying, well, let's see what happens after failure and what are different ways to deal with it, because failure will happen all the time. Let me pause for a second. I don't want to pontificate. There's a good chance that I'm saying things that you've already been thinking about. So can you talk back to me a little bit and say,
Sure.
is this sounding helpful, or is all of this?
No, it makes sense. We've been modeling that behavior of failure and using personal examples, putting us out there, being vulnerable. I think what might be happening is that they understand the learning about learning through failure, but it's really having the confidence and the courage to do it. And we've been providing a safe environment to try to experiment and so forth. But part of it is, I think, a little bit about their friends aren't doing this, so I'm not doing it. A little bit of that, you know, so that they feel like, why should they kind of branch out into some new territory when their friends aren't trying to do it? So I'm going to stay in a safe space where no one's really doing anything. And I think it's this vicious cycle among all the teens where they're not doing anything. And so they're all kind of spiraling together into this kind of perfect storm, and they're not helping each other. So I know that it's hard to answer. There's not one easy answer, but I was just wondering if there's maybe tips of how to, you know, break through that obstacle of not necessarily having the courage to give it a try.
And you're talking about trying basically a totally new activity?
Like a new activity that, yes, new activity that could lead to a new habit, right? A new activity could be, let's say, let's try a new sport, because they know that they would like to maybe do something, but they maybe feel like, oh, well, maybe my time it's too late to start a new sport. And so they're not going to try it because they don't want to fail.
Okay. So
does that make sense?
I think so. So it sounds like in your case, did you say daughter? I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Son,
sorry. So in your case, you're saying maybe your son is kind of thinking down the line, like, how excellent am I going to be at this? And if and it's not clear that I'm going to be good at it, and in fact, I might even fail. So what's the point of even trying? Kind of a
right, and that's all exacerbated by this instant gratification social media environment they live in, that they can't see beyond the next click to see how it can build on something. So
yeah,
it's tricky.
Yeah. Okay, so I have two thoughts for you, and I have zero guarantees as to how useful you find them. One is to focus on the extreme short term and start focusing on fun instead of on achieving any kind of goal or getting good at anything, right? So just how fun would it be to do this thing, or not fun to do this thing? So the opposite approach to, let's see this and then decide if that's something that you want to try to master one day. Right? If you're trying to play soccer, let's just like see how far you can kick this ball. Like, let's just see what it feels like to kick a ball this far, you know, or let's see how it feels to, you know, I don't know, throw 30 balls toward a basket, and see how we feel after. Like, let's just see if it's fun, because it's often just inherently pleasurable to do these things, right? It's once we start putting in the specific achievements that need to be arrived at that it starts being too much pressure and too little fun, right? But if you can actually focus on the experience in the moment, so let's try it for fun. Let's just see if it's fun. I'm not expecting any particular achievement. So maybe that's one thing. The other thing that I'm thinking about is improv, where when you do, so I think improv is like life training. And I think it's a good idea for everybody. And certainly in a situation like this, where somebody's afraid of failure, improv, really teaches you to almost dare failure, right? You're almost daring yourself to go far enough to fail. And failure is a big badge of honor. And every improv class that I've seen, when you fail, one of the first things they teach you is when you stop being able to produce words and you go, and then you go, ta-da! Instead of going, ugh, you go, ta-da! And everybody claps because you were so brave and you tried so hard that you push yourself to failure. So specifically, your son might be interested in learning improv, which could be a really kind of specific way to address it. It's like practicing failure and enjoying it.
Well, no, thanks so much. I'll close on this one. I'll definitely look at Atomic Habits. I think that there's something there. We're starting really, really small, showing success. And the last point is, I definitely am a big believer in improv.
Yeah.
Even for adults.
And the habit of starting small, seeing success, and focusing on having it be as pleasurable as possible.
Right. I understand. And we're trying. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Alan. And if you do it, you've got to do improv with him. That sounds like a great thing. All right, Eran, I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. Are you ready?
I am. I realize it's getting dark around me, but it's not actually that dark here, but the camera.
I forgot to tell everybody that he's actually in Connecticut, so it's getting kind of late back where he is, but that's why it's so dark. Thank you.
There's really light outside. I don't know where the camera is.
Okay, here's a question. And this is kind of related to what Alan was talking about. My daughter's decided that she really wants to make some changes in her life, eat healthier, do more exercise, start her homework earlier. How can I support her without nagging? That is, I don't want her to feel judged or shamed if she doesn't meet her goals, but I also want to encourage her.
I mean, essentially, it's a recap of everything that I covered earlier today. I think it's starting by saying that habits are not about it's not about instantly forming a perfect habit that one never strays from. The goal is to have consistent behavior, and so encourage your child to aim for consistency, not for quality and not for quantity to begin with, and explain the rationale, right? Again, all this through discussion. It's not like, here's how you do this and don't ask me, like explain very clearly. Habits are about being able to do a behavior without even needing any kind of willpower or any kind of thought around it. So something we do, we want to arrive at a point where you wake up and you just feel weird if you're not going out for a run. A situation, by the way, which for me personally is sci-fi. I hate running. But some people feel weird if they don't just wake up and go exercise. And if that's your goal, then that's what we're aiming. And to do that, what we need is start building that change. So you just need to wake up and pretty quickly be, wearing your sneakers and going out. And the first day, you just go out and you run 10 steps and you run back, and that's it. Maybe that's the first week. And it's fine, but you just get in the habit of waking up and going to do it, still bleary-eyed and whatever. So just explaining that that's the idea of building a habit. It's just building a very strong chain, trigger, behavior, and slowly increasing the quantity and the quality of the behavior. So I think the more you can introduce that in advance, the more you can, I guess, also to connect to the previous question, you can almost failure-proof your child in this sense, because first of all, you're aiming very low intentionally, and increase the requirement. So do this consultation in advance. Secondly, also tell them, look, you're going to fall off the wagon sometime, and that's okay. The main thing is just not to freak out when this happens. You missed a day, do it the next day. You missed a week, start again the next week. Like, it's fine. So kind of failure proof them. So I think that's a big part of the support, is providing the cognitive framework around them, right? Which is a lot of what parenting is about. Just help them understand what's going on and how to prepare. In real time, as they're going through it, I think that the support is a lot of, first of all, respecting their space, saying, how much do you want me involved in this? Right? Do you want to put your tracking chart inside your room where I don't see it? Or on your door? Or is it okay if I look? Like, really ask them what they want. If they do want you involved, praise them or praise whatever you can see. Do not ever at all get on their case for missing the activity that they're trying to do. Zero. You can have regular time for reviews if they want it, right? Say, well, how is this going? You can talk about it at dinner, but you don't catch them failing, right? You only catch them succeeding, and then occasionally you ask them if they want your help or advice, basically, weekly at dinner or whatever. So that I would say is that's the formula I would recommend for supporting the formation of a new habit. Lavish praise and check if they want your advice or feedback.
Okay, great advice, Eran. You know, we love how you always encourage parents to go back and have the conversations with the kids. Don't be afraid to ask them what they think about an action that you're considering or that they are undertaking, especially to make a change in habits. All right, this last question is for parents. I have adult children. They do this to me all the time. Let's see what you think, Eran. Whenever I set a goal for myself, my teenagers try to undermine me. That is, whether it's less time at work or more time working out, they say I never stick with anything. I find their comments very hurtful, but I don't know how to respond. Do you have any suggestions? Parent trying to make changes in habits, teenagers who are very good at pointing out what parents don't do.
Well, I would say number one is find a good support group. Right?
Not
So
routines.
have friends that are encouraging for you. Have, if your spouse is encouraging, your friends, your family, like, because obviously it's still hurtful when your semi-adult child is saying these kinds of things to you. So find people who can support you, because ultimately what you need to do is prove your child wrong without getting into kind of frontal collision with your child. So you need to get your support and energy from someplace. That's a general point. Beyond that, in terms of how to communicate with your child, if your child is saying that, I mean, this really is stepping into the realm of conflict management. So a lot of good I statements, right? When you say this, I feel this, it makes it a little harder for me. It sounds like you can try actually just reflecting and seeing what happens, like taking it seriously. All right, I'm a little bit all over the place, so let me pause for a second. So if your child is coming to you and saying, no way you're going to be practicing piano for 10 minutes every day. I've seen you try before and it never stuck. And you pause, and the goal is not to push back, not to say you're wrong or you're awful to say this or anything like that. One version is just to reflect back, to say, it sounds like you really just don't believe that I can carry this through. That'll often take a lot of the sting out of it because it takes two to fight. Right? So if you're just kind of listening and understanding, and then you might go cry in your room, right? And like call your mom and ask for support, but to just not engage in a fight level about this, I think is a good idea. You could say, when you say this, it's demoralizing for me and it's hard for me and all of that. I don't think that's super productive. If a child has taken the effort of trying to upset you, I think letting them know that they succeeded is not necessarily the best thing to get them to stop doing it. So I think upon consideration, I would say that I would actually suggest, reflecting, saying it really sounds like you just don't believe that I have it in me to do this. And your child may be like, oh, I'm just kidding. Or your child may be like, well, you never succeeded before. And you might either have it like, if it were me, I would say, so do you want to have a real conversation about this? Like what I'm trying to do differently so on, or do you just want to tell me that you don't think I'll succeed? And if they want to talk, then great, then we can use it for modeling. And if they're just like, no, whatever, I don't want to get into it, you're just going to fail. Then you might say, well, we'll see, I'm going to try. And then prove them wrong. You could go down a different path of like trying to take this as an opportunity to teach them about what is supportive behavior and what is not, and so on. I think that's a longer and bigger conversation for us to have too, about how to do that. But if it's really about just kind of you and them, I would not be negatively moved, because that's a reward basically, right?
I think that's great advice, Eran. It reminds me of what you told us a couple weeks ago about, our kids, especially now during the pandemic, can really push our buttons. It can be very upsetting. And what happens if you feel as a parent that you're going to lose it? You're going to cry, for example. And you said it's try as best as you can not to do that, because kids need to feel that at least we can keep it together, that that may be a fearful thing for them to experience. You can take a time out, you can ask them to take a time out, but try not to just lose it yourself completely.
Yeah, and we can talk about it later. Again, like when everybody's calmer, we can certainly talk about it and how that worked and how that made you feel and so on. But yeah, I think for a child to see a parent kind of break down is can be really either terrifying or encouraging, depending on what kind of track they're on. And neither of those are things that we would want.
Well, I want to close by just saying thank you to all of you who stayed with us, who supported one another through the chat. There have been great feedback pieces and suggestions, and I just really appreciate all of you and how well you've done today and supporting one another. And Eran, thank you for all your pearls of wisdom, and as always, great advice. This will be on our YouTube channel in a few days. We work with the Boys and Girls Club to produce our videos. They used to come in person and film events, but now they are behind the scenes. So again, thank you, Jacob Crowell and the Boys and Girls Club. Thank you, everybody, for hanging with us today, and most especially to Eran Magen for your wisdom and advice and support. So thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. Happy MLK Day, and we will see you all again soon.